I think anybody near 70 who has not had to do that, and so many things you're like, okay, I'm done. Like, I am not going to add another app to my phone. So this is it. Okay, this email thing. I don't care what comes after that. I am done. You got me doing email now. I'm not going to do this text thing. I don't know. It's in that way. I don't think there's quite often there's not ill will. It is just okay. I gotta. We're talking about grandfathers again. Just my grandfather. So I'm born in the Negro era. My grandfather, who was born in 1892, could not sing colored until the day he passed away. He's referred to black people as colored, but it was that's where he was in time.
Yeah, it's so interesting. Let's finish the question. Then I want to jump to something else because it did make me think of just this story that I'd love to get your thoughts on. But the second part of what you said earlier was the softness, engaging on issues in a soft way. I think it's something as practitioners we don't necessarily talk about. I think a lot of us understand inherently when we talk about engaging topics or issues softly, like using people of color. Dive into that a little bit more and help our listeners understand what you mean by engaging with a topic that's soft in a
Yeah.
soft manner.
So in the university setting, it's guy. I mean, I'm laughing just thinking about it. If you walk around and listen, there are two kinds of people. There are white people and there are underrepresented minorities. And you may not even get male, female out of that. Forget any broader intersectionality than that. And underrepresented minorities at the same university, I can walk around and ask each person who's incorporated in that, and I'll get all kinds of different answers about what people are talking about. I would when I teach classes on these topics, and I haven't taught a class for a while now. The beauty of being emeritus, although I did do a guest lecture today in class, but I would start classes with two questions. And this just say it's classes related to these issues we're talking about today. Race in the law or race in sports or whatever it might be, gender issues in sports. The first question would be, what's the ideal? What is it that we're striving for? So to spend a minute to figure out, okay, we're going to do all this stuff. When will we know we're done? What is it that we're trying to get to? So that's question number one. And no, I don't have an answer for that. And number two, and this becomes very difficult to do. You cannot say in this class minorities or people of color. You got to give whenever you got to give the laundry list every time. Let me know what you're talking about. And it's not that hard, but it's hard, and it's and we a lot of times we'd end up with kids saying, and did I leave anybody out? Is there anything else I should include in that to get a feel for what people are talking about or not? So the other thing about underrepresented minorities is, and I've said this too, if you're going to say that, I'm going to say overrepresented majority. That's what I'm going to start saying. I'm if we're gonna just other each other, I'm going to give you an other kind of phrasing too, if you can't be specific. The last thing, the reason for precision and detail, and we're seeing this in the conversations about reparations for one, which is a whole, that's a different podcast on a different channel. But if you're trying to figure out, and now there is this conversation about what is it, ADOS, American or African descendant of slaves, versus first, second generation immigrants from Africa or the Caribbean or wherever else. If we're going to start really trying to be precise about issues that we're concerned about and trying to figure out the right policies for different people. Is there a difference if you immigrated to the U.S. in 1962 as the child of the king of whatever African country you name, versus you were brought here in the Middle Passage, and your family after the Great Migration still lives in the same neighborhood, the same, lack of a better way to phrase it, the same ghetto, and you haven't found a way out. Now, if there's a $50,000 reparations to be given, should be given to Black people, should be given to people that are ADOS, should it be given more to ADOS versus those that are recent immigrants? You get stopped at 3 a.m. on a back road in Mississippi and you're black, you're black. I mean, I think we all agree on that, but there are some nuances to consider. And then we go to the Latino community, and you have this different conversation about nuances that exist there as well. So it's much deeper than just minorities, underrepresented minorities, people of color. And those, if we're going to spend some serious time, these are issues that we need to work through.
I couldn't agree more with you. I think it sounds like from what I'm hearing, the pitfall is often that when we engage with a term such as people of color or underrepresented, historically underrepresented groups or minorities, you as a company then look at that like, okay, we need to do something for that group. So you create an ERG for minorities, not realizing the individual needs within each of those groups don't necessarily all need the same solution and aren't necessarily all facing the same problem. So I think it's a really important thing that I think companies need to take a deeper look at. And for any of our listeners that are creating programs, it's something they really need to keep at the forefront.
Yeah, and I'll say, just because you'll hear me on podcasts elsewhere, lecture, I will say minorities and people of color, I'll throw that out there sometimes too. It is a shorthand method. Sometimes it is the right phrasing to use, but sometimes I will use it, inappropriately as well.
Yeah, I think it's also what I hear is what I hear you saying. It's reiterated, I think, from all the other people I really look up to in this space, which is let's focus on the work. Like, terms are important, and let's make sure we get those right so we understand what we're talking about. But there should be a little bit of grace when the outcome isn't, because your outcome shouldn't always just to be use the right term. It should be, what impact are we driving for these groups? Right? Are we driving the correct impact? Because we can talk about what we want to call each other. And that's fantastic. And I really want to respect that. And let's get that right. But at the end of the day, I want to stop facing discrimination. I think I grew up with my dad telling me it's easy. And I think he got it from a letter from a Birmingham jail from MLK, that it's very easy when you're not the group being discriminated against to tell that group, just wait, just be patient. If you were to do it in this manner, or if you were to change it into today's conversation, if you were just to change the way you talk about it, if you were just to change the way you present it, then we could get change.
Yeah, the great King book, Why We Can't Wait, the Brown versus Board of Education, the key language in there, with all deliberate speed. I mean, yeah, that if you're not in those shoes in that moment, what does that mean? What level of patience should there be? Can there be? I agree.
Yeah. Well, this is fantastic. I want to transition into sports a little bit.
Good. I'm glad you're lighting up a little bit. Is that what we're?
Yeah. Let's bring it up. Because I think there's some interesting things that has been at the front. I'm a football guy, so obviously some of my analogies are going to be about football. But I think there's a transition I've been seeing, having watched a lot of football between the past couple of years and this year, and that is more, not all, but more announcers being very intentional when they talk about Black quarterbacks, specifically that position and the history that exists behind it. I would love your perspective when we talk, and also in coaching, when we talk about the words we use to describe performance of athletes and coaches, the difference that our words can imply when talking about these different athletes or coaches.
There's a historic abundance of studies that show that the more athletic phrasing, the more animal phrasing, those are likely to be reference to the African American athlete. And the heady, thoughtful, intelligent, that's more likely to be associated with the white athlete. I think we're at a point in time where there is a consciousness amongst journalists to do better. I saw something today, the Pew Research, that pretty shocking. 82% of journalists that cover sports are white. So this encompasses writers and broadcasters and the like. 82%, and it was a pretty high. I don't remember the percentage. I'm a savant, but not that good. I forget but it was a pretty high percentage of that group is white. I think there's only 5 or 6% were blacks, and I don't know the rest of the breakdown. So it's pretty striking, and most of them are men. So the idea that the language and descriptors that would be used would not be what we would want them to be is not surprising if you're not part of that group. That you are, even on the field of play, you're not the other. In the broadcast booth or in the articles that are written, you are the other. If you are, see, now I'd have to do my laundry list if I was going to do what I said you should do, if this was my classroom. But if you are a person of color,
Yeah, I think what
or a woman, right? Because the women are this. We definitely saw that in the Final Four, kind of the struggles. How do we deal with these women? This is problematic for us.
I always think it's interesting, and I think it's one of the reasons I think data is so incredibly important to the conversation personally around diversity and inclusion, because I think some of those behaviors become more evident, and we can have conversations oftentimes without it coming across, or the conversation oftentimes being framed as it's me just saying something. It's me taking my opinion of maybe that I just don't like white commentators, or my preferences. I always see the white commentators versus being able to see the hard number of 85% of commentators
Right.
are white. So I think when we look at that, how can companies take that kind of analogy of sports and that data and how it's used there to kind of understand how that's actually worked to change in very real sense how broadcasters talk about black athletes? How can they take that and use that in their own companies?
Yeah, I mean that's a great question, because why do broadcasters do it? It's because that's what they know, that's what they've heard, that's what they believe. That's because that's how they've been educated. They haven't learned otherwise. So I think that's universal. That can cross over into the business side. I mean, you cross over into the business side of sports, which is a closer step to the business of business. That the earliest modern era trouble that we saw sports leaders get into because of language was Al Campanis on Nightline in 1987 telling Ted Koppel that blacks lacked the necessities to manage in baseball. And then when Koppel gives him a chance, he then goes into all the tropes that he has in his stores. Al Campanis was the executive vice president of the Los Angeles Dodgers. This is on the 40th anniversary of Jackie Robinson integrating Major League Baseball. So this is supposed to be a glorious kind of celebratory conversation. So Koppel sees, wait, what's this? What is this old white guy saying? Blacks lack the necessities. So he keeps asking questions, and Campanis keeps digging deeper. And when Koppel breaks for a commercial, and he basically says, this is a great thing to Google if you have not seen this. He says, we're going to come right back after commercial, and I'm going to give you another chance because I think you need it. And then when he comes back, Koppel says, and Campanis is sat to think of all the learnings he's had over all these years about black people. And he's going to tell this national audience, again, this is pre-internet, this is the last newscast of the evening for America. Everybody's watching Nightline. They want to see what this guy has to say. So Koppel says, no, you say they lack the necessities? What do you mean? He said, well, certainly, Mr. Koppel, it's like, why can't black people swim? They lack the buoyancy. So it goes on like that. But here's a guy who, and the Dodgers, spoiler alert, the Dodgers fire him the next day, which became kind of the pattern of what you do in these things. But here's a guy, this is a guy who grows up and I think he actually went to NYU, but he grows up in minor league baseball. He hears all this stuff. He's around all white people. This is what he's learned. This is where his education has been. He's now a middle-aged man, and he has this platform, and this is what he says. And I mean, years later, I became friends with Dusty Baker, and Dusty, the great manager of the Houston Astros, now played on the Dodgers when Campanis was around. And I said something to Dusty like, and that guy Al Campanis, I said kind of hatefully, and Dusty said, "Hey, Ken, Al was the guy that the brothers went to. Al was a good guy. Al was just reflecting what he knew." So, so the idea that as sports broadcasters, as sports business leaders, as business leaders in general, the idea that we're very careful about this education and making sure that when we give somebody the power to do things, that they really do have the information that they need to make the right kinds of decisions, that they're not relying on tropes and childhood stories and in some cases industry practice and protocol. How do you get somebody to the new era, to the new day, and so they're not caught like he's a good guy, uh, but he's just got stuff in his head, and it came out, and he had the power to put it out there.
Yeah, I think it's such a interesting line because I think it's what I always tell people. It's not my line, and my dad came up with it. But it's present. Be present, not perfect, and that's really what we're asking leaders to do. Like, it, I think one of the things that I've heard that just seems very true to me is you didn't become racist or sexist in 45 minutes. It was a lifetime of experiences and reflections that you then picked up. I then can't make you unracist or unbiased or unsex in 45 minutes. And so it's the understanding that it's a growth process, right? That it's going to take some time to unlearn those and realize, oh, even though I grew up, like in your example, around all these guys that were saying these different things about black people, it doesn't necessarily like you need to have the progress and engage in that. And the expectation is never that you should be perfect from day one, but the idea is you will be present and respectful. It doesn't mean don't hold you accountable. Like, it doesn't mean you get a pass for everything, but it does mean like in order to get better, in order for us to move forward, I think we need more people remaining present, remaining engaged. I'd love to get your thoughts.